Welcome to Lens of History. Before we dive into one of the most mysterious disappearances in American history, do me a favor. Smash that like button and tell me in the comments what city or country you're listening from. I love knowing where our community of history seekers is tuning in from around the world. Now, settle in, because the story you're about to hear will haunt you long after it ends. Isaiah's feet had been bleeding for 3 days. The stolen shoes, 2 sizes too small, taken from a dead man's porch, had rubbed his heels raw. Every step left a dark smear on the mountain rock. But Isaiah kept climbing because bleeding feet meant he was still alive, still moving, still one step further from the Hutchinson plantation in Virginia, where he'd spent 34 years as property. 3 weeks since the thunderstorm. 3 weeks since he'd slipped his chain in the chaos of lightning strikes and screaming horses. 3 weeks of running at night, hiding during the day in hollow logs that stank of decay and fox piss. Eating raw mushrooms that made him vomit. Drinking from streams that might be poisoned, always listening for the baying of bloodhounds that never came. Master Hutchinson was too cheap to pay for a proper hunt. A carpenter with a mangled hand wasn't worth the cost of dogs and professional catchers. Better to write him off as a loss and buy a younger, stronger replacement. That cheapness saved Isaiah's life. He climbed higher into the Appalachian Mountains, following something he couldn't explain, not instinct, not logic, but a pull in his chest like a rope tied to his heart, dragging him upward through the October cold. His breath came in white clouds. His fingers had gone numb hours ago. And still he climbed. The rock walls closed in on either side, forming a corridor so narrow Isaiah had to turn sideways to squeeze through. Jagged stone tore at his shirt, scraped skin from his shoulders. The passage twisted, darkened, became a throat of stone swallowing him whole. And then it opened. Isaiah stumbled into sunlight so bright it blinded him. He blinked, staggered, fell to his knees on moss so thick it felt like stepping onto a living carpet. The valley spread before him like something from a fever dream. 2 acres of flat land tucked inside a perfect bowl of sheer rock walls rising 200 feet on all sides. A waterfall cascaded down the eastern cliff, catching morning light and throwing rainbows into the mist. Pine trees clustered thick at the edges. The stream running through the center was so clear Isaiah could count individual pebbles on the bottom. But what made Isaiah's breath catch? What made tears stream down his face for the first time since childhood? Was the entrance behind him. That narrow crack in the rock, you couldn't see it from above, couldn't see it from below, couldn't find it unless you knew exactly where to look, or stumbled upon it half dead and desperate like Isaiah just had. He pressed his forehead to the moss and sobbed. 40 years of life. 34 of them in chains. 34 years of yes, master, of swallowing rage, of watching his mother sold south, of building the furniture that decorated the houses where decisions about his existence were made over wine and cigars. All of it had led here. To this hidden place, to this impossible sanctuary. Thank you, he whispered into the ground, to God, to ancestors, to whatever force had guided him. Thank you. The valley didn't answer, but Isaiah felt it listening. Winter came hard and early that year. Isaiah built his shelter against the northern cliff face where the rock held heat like a brick oven. He wove pine branches so tight that when the November rains came, water slid off without a drop getting through. He caught fish using traps his grandfather, the real one back in Africa before the slavers, had taught him to make from bent willow branches and patience. He learned which mushrooms were safe by watching what the deer ate. He learned where the chestnuts fell thickest. He learned that the mountain listened to those who respected it and killed those who didn't. In December, he killed a deer with a deadfall trap. 200 pounds of log dropping from 15 feet onto the animal's spine, instant and merciful. Isaiah spent 3 days processing every part. Meat stripped and smoked, hide stretched and scraped until soft as cloth. Bones boiled for tools, sinew dried for thread, even the hooves rendered down for glue. Nothing wasted, everything honored. He didn't just survive that winter, he prepared. Because even alone, even in his hidden paradise, Isaiah knew the truth. This place was too perfect for just one man. The valley was waiting for something. He was being prepared to be a keeper, not an occupant. May 1849. Morning mist still hung in the trees when Isaiah heard the crashing. Not the careful sounds of deer, not the deliberate movement of bear. This was panic. Branches breaking, rocks scattering, the desperate thrashing of something pursued. Isaiah grabbed the knife he'd made from deer bone and flattened himself against the rock wall near the entrance. If slave catchers had found him, he'd kill at least one before they took him. That was the promise he'd made to himself. A woman exploded through the gap in the rocks. She took 3 staggering steps and collapsed face first into the stream. Isaiah didn't move. Couldn't. Because the woman's back, visible through her shredded dress, was a landscape of scars, some old and silvered, some fresh and still weeping. And the wound on her left shoulder, where buckshot had torn away a strip of flesh, was leaking blood into the clear water, turning it pink. She lifted her head. Water streamed from her hair. Her eyes found Isaiah's, and in them he saw something worse than fear. He saw acceptance. She'd already decided she was dead. She was just waiting for it to happen. "Please," she whispered. Blood bubbled at the corner of her mouth. "I can't run anymore." Isaiah stepped forward, knife still in hand. "Anyone following you?" "Don't know. Don't care. If they come, let them. I'm done." "You're not done." Isaiah knelt beside her, studying the wound. "Buckshot. Grazed you. Painful but not fatal if we clean it. Can you stand?" "Why would I?" "Because I didn't survive a year alone in these mountains to watch you die in my stream. Now stand up." Something in his voice, not kindness, but command, made her obey. Isaiah half carried her to his shelter, sat her down, and built up the fire. He had water boiling within minutes, cloth torn from his spare shirt steaming in the pot. The woman watched him work with distant, calculating eyes. "You're not going to." "No." "How do you know what I was going to ask?" "Because I know what men do. I'm not those men. You're safe here. Now be quiet while I clean this." The wound was ugly, but manageable. Isaiah worked in silence, cleaning away dirt and fragments of fabric, packing it with a poultice of herbs he'd learned could prevent rot. The woman didn't make a sound, though her jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. "What's your name?" Isaiah asked, wrapping the shoulder with strips of cloth. "Had a lot of names. The one I was born with died a long time ago. Master Carroll called me Hannah, so that's what I answer to now." "Where'd you run from?" "North Carolina, 9 days ago. Midwife, house slave. The mistress died in childbirth and Master blamed me even though I told him the baby was positioned wrong, told him we needed a doctor. He didn't listen. Then she died and he needed someone to punish, so..." She gestured at her back with her good arm. "They whipped you before you ran." "After I ran the first time. Caught me in 2 days. This was the punishment. Then they were going to sell me to the sugar plantations in Louisiana." Hannah's voice went flat. "Nobody survives the sugar plantations. It's just a slower death than hanging. So I ran again during the mistress's funeral. Stole a horse, rode it until it collapsed, kept walking. And now I'm here. She looked around the valley for the first time, really seeing it. Where is here? Nowhere, Isaiah said. Everywhere. Someplace that doesn't exist on any map. I call it the valley, but it doesn't need a name. Names can be found. Hannah's eyes sharpened. You're building something. It wasn't a question. I don't know, Isaiah admitted. Maybe. Or maybe it's being built through me. But yes, I think this place is meant for more than just hiding. I think it's meant for living. Then we build it, Hannah said. You and me, and anyone else who finds their way here. You planning to stay? Until they drag me out dead. I'm done running, done being property, done surviving when I could be living. If this valley is real, if it's as hidden as it seems, then yes, I'm staying. And if others come, we help them stay too. Isaiah felt something shift in his chest. Relief. Purpose. The weight of solitude lifting. Then welcome home, Hannah. She smiled for the first time, and Isaiah saw the woman she might have been if the world had been different. Strong, fierce, unbroken despite everything they'd done to break her. They came slowly at first, one every few months, then two at once, then a family. Samuel arrived in August, a mulatto overseer who'd been forced to whip his own brother to death for stealing bread. He'd made it look fatal while actually missing every vital organ. But the brother died anyway 3 days later from infection. Samuel carried that death like stones in his pockets. But he also carried organizational skills that transformed the valley from a hiding place into a functioning community. Ruth showed up in September with 3 children, ages 6, 4, and 8 months, having walked 200 miles through hostile territory. She'd wrapped the baby's mouth with cloth soaked in whiskey to keep it quiet when they passed near towns. The baby had survived. So had Ruth's ability to love, though she never spoke about what she'd left behind. The brothers Marcus and John came in October, both over 6 feet tall, both with hands like hammers. They'd killed their master in self-defense when he'd tried to castrate Marcus for looking at a white woman who'd actually looked at Marcus first. They brought strength and the constant fear that their crime made them a danger to everyone. But Isaiah and Hannah decided, in the valley, there was no such thing as a crime against a master because there were no masters anymore. More came. James, who'd been a blacksmith and could make tools from scrap metal. Rebecca, who knew herbs and healing. Thomas and Sarah, married in secret on a plantation, still married here in freedom. Children born into slavery, arriving wide-eyed and silent, having learned before they could walk that making noise meant punishment. By September 1850, they numbered 46. And then, on December 3rd, the old man arrived. Isaiah was checking the fish traps when he felt it. A presence at the valley entrance. He turned to see a figure leaning on a walking stick carved with symbols Isaiah recognized from dreams about his grandfather, about Africa, about things that happened before he was born, but somehow lived in his blood. The old man was thin as smoke, his hair white as winter clouds, his eyes clouded with cataracts. But those ruined eyes looked at Isaiah with perfect clarity. "Took me 40 years to find this place," the old man said. His voice sounded like wind through a canyon. 40 years following the dreams. Now I'm here, and now I understand why I had to live this long. "Who are you, grandfather?" Isaiah asked, using the African term of respect. "Had so many names I forgot the first one. Was born somewhere in the Carolinas, don't remember where. Been slave, been free, been caught and enslaved again. Been sold 7 times. Outlived 5 masters. They called me Crazy Jacob for a while because I saw things that hadn't happened yet. They called me prophet after 3 of my visions came true. So call me that. Prophet. It's what I am now. What do you see here, Prophet? The old man swept his cloudy gaze across the valley. Every person had stopped working to watch this exchange. Even the children had gone silent. I see 8 years, Prophet said. 8 years of peace. 8 years of joy. 8 years of proof that your people are fully human, fully capable, fully deserving of the freedom they claim. I see children born here who never know chains. I see a community that shouldn't exist, thriving in the gaps of the world. That sounds like hope, Hannah said, stepping forward. It is. Prophet's smile faded. But I also see the ending. Fire and forgetting. I see this place vanishing like it never was. I see history trying to erase you. I see 47 souls becoming a mystery that haunts these mountains for 200 years. Silence fell over the valley like snow. Then we build it anyway, Ruth said, her baby on her hip. We build it because these 8 years matter more than what comes after. We build it because they need to know we existed, Samuel added. Even if they spend 200 years trying to forget. We build it, Isaiah agreed. Because building it is the whole point. Because creating something beautiful in the middle of their ugliest creation is how we win. Even if we lose everything else, we win by having built it at all. That night, all 47 residents gathered around the central fire. The December cold bit had exposed skin, but the fire roared high, throwing sparks toward stars so bright they looked close enough to touch. Isaiah stood before them, this accidental leader who'd never wanted to lead anything except himself to freedom. We're 47 now, he began. 47 people who are supposed to be property or dead or broken. But look around. Are we any of those things? No. The chorus came from 47 throats. The prophet says we have 8 years. Maybe he's right. Maybe we have longer. Maybe we have less. But however long we have, I propose we use it to prove something. Prove what? Grace asked. She was 10 years old now, small for her age, with eyes that never forgot a single thing they saw. Prove that freedom isn't something given by white men in Washington or Richmond or anywhere else. Prove that we can govern ourselves, feed ourselves, protect ourselves, love ourselves. Prove that every law written to keep us in chains was a lie from the beginning. Marcus stood, his massive frame casting a shadow across half the circle. I'm staying. Killed a man to get here, and I'd kill 100 more to keep this place safe. This is home now. One by one they stood. They committed. They agreed. This hidden valley would be their proof. Little Grace stood last, her small voice somehow carrying across the entire space. I'm going to remember all of you. Every face. Every name, even the names we don't speak aloud anymore. Every story. So when they try to forget us, there's at least one person who refuses. I'll be the proof. Prophet looked at her with those ruined eyes that saw too much. Child, that's a heavy burden. I know, Grace said. I remember everything everyone's ever told me about what was done to them. Every scar has a story, and I carry them all. If that's my burden, I'll carry it until someone's ready to help. Isaiah felt tears on his face. He looked at these 46 impossible people in this impossible place, and he understood something profound. They'd already won. The masters back in Virginia and Carolina and Alabama thought they'd escaped. But escape was just the beginning. This gathering, this commitment, this choice to build rather than just hide. This was freedom. Real, actual, undeniable freedom. Then let's build something they'll never fully erase, Isaiah said. Let's build it so well that even when we vanish, Our ghosts haunt these mountains forever. Let's build it so that 200 years from now, someone will stand where we're standing and wonder, how did 47 enslaved people create a functioning community in the heart of slave country? And in wondering, they'll have to admit that we were fully human all along. They sang that night, spirituals and work songs and melodies from Africa that no one remembered learning, but everyone somehow knew. The sound rose with the smoke, carrying their commitment up to the stars, down to the earth, out across the mountains that hid and protected them. 47 souls building the impossible. And for 8 miraculous years, they would succeed beyond measure. But that success would come at a price. Complete erasure. Total forgetting. A mystery so deep that even 163 years later, no one could agree on what happened to the community that shouldn't have existed in the first place. For now, though, there was only firelight and song, and the unshakable certainty that they'd found something worth dying for, which meant it was definitely worth living for. They were free, and nothing, not masters, not laws, not history itself, could take that away. Even when it tried, even when it succeeded, even when the only proof that remained was a name carved into stone, a story passed through generations, and a valley that still echoed with voices if you knew how to listen. Spring, 1851. 3 months after the gathering, Isaiah woke to the sound of wood splitting, not the careful, measured strikes of someone doing morning chores. This was fury made physical, the crack of an axe biting deep, over and over, with mechanical rage. He stumbled from his shelter into the gray pre-dawn light and found Marcus stripped to the waist despite the March cold, attacking a pine tree like it had personally wronged him. Each swing sent chips flying. Sweat poured down his back in rivers, steaming in the cold air. His face was blank as stone, but his hands were bleeding where blisters had burst and reformed. Samuel stood nearby, arms crossed, watching. Behind him, a dozen people worked on what looked like the skeleton of a massive structure built into the cliff face itself. "How long's he been at it?" Isaiah asked quietly. "Since midnight. Had a nightmare about the master he killed. Woke up screaming, couldn't go back to sleep, so he started cutting." Samuel's voice carried neither judgment nor pity. "We've got enough logs for the entire longhouse frame now. Sometimes trauma builds things." That's a cold way to put it. It's an honest way. Marcus killed a man to get here. Doesn't matter that it was self-defense. Doesn't matter that the master was trying to castrate him for looking at a white woman. His hands still remember the feeling of a skull caving in under a shovel. So he works until his body's too exhausted for his mind to think. And we benefit from it. Samuel gestured at the growing structure. So we work alongside him and pretend not to notice when he cries. Isaiah looked closer and saw the tear tracks cutting through the sawdust on Marcus's face. Hannah emerged from the darkness, carrying a basket of early mushrooms. She took in the scene with one glance. He's going to hurt himself. He's going to build a shelter for 47 people, Samuel corrected. Then he'll hurt himself. But by then we'll have a longhouse, so it's a trade I'll make. You're heartless. I'm practical. There's a difference. Samuel's voice hardened. We don't have the luxury of coddling trauma. We have 8 years. The prophet said so. Which means we have 2,920 days to build something that proves we're human. Marcus can grieve while he works, or he can grieve while he sits. But either way, time keeps moving. I prefer he grieve productively. Hannah looked like she wanted to argue, but Ruth appeared from her watch position at the valley entrance. Someone's going to have to force him to stop soon. He's been swinging that axe for 6 hours. His shoulders are going to give out. You do it, Samuel said. He respects you. Ruth walked over to Marcus and simply placed her hand on the axe handle mid-swing. The big man froze, his muscles trembling with suppressed energy. That tree's dead, Marcus. You've murdered it thoroughly. Now come eat something before you collapse. I can't stop, Marcus whispered. His voice cracked. If I stop working, I start thinking. If I start thinking, I see his face. The way it looked when the shovel connected. The way his eye just popped, like stepping on a grape. I can't carry that and also stand still. Then don't stand still. Eat while you walk, drink while you work. But you're going to eat and drink because I didn't survive 200 miles of hell with 3 children just to watch you work yourself to death out of guilt. Ruth's voice was iron wrapped in silk. You killed a man who was going to mutilate you. That's not murder. That's survival. And survival means staying alive long enough to make it worth the cost. Marcus finally lowered the axe. His hands were shaking so badly, he almost dropped it. I don't feel like I survived, he said quietly. I feel like I just traded one kind of death for another. The only difference is, this death takes longer. Good, Ruth said, and her bluntness made Marcus look up in shock. Let it take as long as possible. Let it take 70 years. Let you die an old man surrounded by grandchildren in a valley full of free people. That's how you honor what you had to do, by living long enough to make it mean something. Isaiah watched Marcus's face crumble and rebuild itself in the span of 3 breaths. Whatever internal calculation the big man was doing, whatever balance he was trying to strike between guilt and purpose, Ruth's words had shifted the equation. All right, Marcus said finally. All right, I'll eat. Then I'll get back to work. Good. Because this longhouse isn't going to build itself. And I've got plans for a security perimeter that's going to require your particular skills with heavy lifting. That was Ruth. Turning trauma into tactical advantage without making it sound like exploitation. Making broken people feel useful instead of pitied. Over the next 4 months, they built the longhouse. And in building it, they built something else. A community that knew how to carry each other's weight. Late summer, 1851. The longhouse was finished. 20 feet deep, carved partially into the cliff face itself, so the back wall was living stone that held heat from the central fire pit. 40 feet wide, with sleeping platforms for every family separated by hanging deerskin curtains. The roof was layered pine bark sealed with pine pitch, shedding water like it had been designed by nature itself. But the real genius was in what they'd hidden. Samuel had designed false walls throughout the structure, spaces where people could hide if hunters came. He'd created a smoke vent system that could be closed in minutes, making the longhouse look abandoned. He'd even built a concealed exit that led to a cave system in the cliff face, a last resort escape route if the valley entrance was compromised. You think like a man who's been hunted, Isaiah observed. I think like a man who did the hunting, Samuel corrected. His face went distant. I was an overseer for 8 years before I ran. You know what that means. It means I chased down runaways, caught them, brought them back to be punished. I know every trick because I've seen every trick fail. How many did you catch? 23. Samuel's voice was flat. 23 human beings I dragged back to hell. The last one was my brother Daniel. Master ordered me to whip him for stealing bread. Not just whip, make an example. 50 lashes. I tried to miss the vital organs, tried to make it look worse than it was. But infection doesn't care about intentions. He died 3 days later, calling my name, asking why I'd done it. The longhouse was silent except for the crackling fire. Everyone had stopped what they were doing to listen. That's when I ran, Samuel continued. Not because I suddenly grew a conscience, because I finally understood that there was no such thing as a good overseer, a kind master, a gentle slavery. You were either property or you were complicit in the owning. Those were the only options. So I chose a third option. I left. But Daniel's still dead. Those 23 people I caught are still suffering, and no amount of building this community brings them back. Hannah stepped forward. So we build it for them. We make this place good enough, successful enough, that if they could see it, they'd say, maybe it was worth it. Maybe Samuel had to see the worst to help build the best. That's a comforting lie, Samuel said. It's a necessary truth, Hannah countered. Because the alternative is you die of guilt, and then what? Your brother's still dead and we lose your skills. At least this way, Daniel's death contributes to 47 people staying free. It's not redemption, but it's something. Samuel nodded slowly. Then I'll take something, because nothing would kill me. That conversation became the foundation of how they dealt with their collective trauma. They didn't ignore it, didn't pretend everyone had clean hands and pure hearts. They acknowledged the blood, shed, witnessed, participated in, and then they used that knowledge to build better. Marcus's guilt about killing his master became expertise in defense. Samuel's shame about being an overseer became genius at organization and security. Hannah's rage about the mistress who died while she was blamed became dedication to bringing every baby in the valley into the world safely. They weaponized their trauma and aimed it at survival. Spring, 1852. The gardens were planted. Corn, beans, squash. The three sisters, as some of the older residents remembered from tribal traditions that predated slavery. James the blacksmith had forged actual tools from the scraps of metal he'd carried. 2 hoes, 3 shovels, a collection of knives. But the planting process revealed a fault line in the community that no one had anticipated. Thomas, a man in his 30s who'd been a field hand on a massive Georgia plantation, stood in the cleared garden plot and refused to touch a hoe. "I'm not doing it," he said flatly. "Not doing what?" Isaiah asked, confused. "It's just planting." "It's not just planting. It's field work. It's the same motion, the same tool, the same bent-back position I had for 20 years while an overseer stood behind me with a whip. You're asking me to voluntarily do the thing that defined my enslavement." The gathered community went silent. They'd all been so focused on survival that no one had considered this, that the physical motions of freedom might look exactly like the physical motions of bondage. Samuel spoke carefully. "The difference is you're doing it for yourself, for us, not for a master." "The difference is I'm choosing to do it," Thomas corrected. "Except I'm not, am I? Because if I don't do it, we don't eat. If I don't do it, I'm letting down the community. So where's the choice? Where's the freedom?" Ruth's voice cut through the tension. "So, what do you suggest? We all starve rather than farm. We forage and hunt exclusively, which will take twice as many people and deplete the valley's resources in 3 years." "I don't know." Thomas's voice rose. "I don't have an answer. I just know that every time I look at that hoe, I see my father's broken back. I see my brother collapsing in the cotton field at 13 years old. I see 20 years of my life, stolen one bent knee at a time. And you're asking me to voluntarily bend that knee again." The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected voice. Little Grace, now 12 years old. "Then don't bend," she said. Everyone turned to look at her. "If bending triggers the memory, don't bend. Build raised beds, tall enough that you can work standing up. It'll be harder to construct, but Marcus and John can do heavy lifting. Then the farming looks different, feels different, is different." The simplicity of it stunned everyone. Samuel recovered first. "That's actually brilliant. Raised beds would also drain better, warm faster in spring, and be easier to defend from pests. It solves multiple problems." But Thomas was looking at Grace with something like wonder. "You did that on purpose. Found a way to make me useful without making me a field hand again. I found a way to honor what you survived while still feeding us," Grace corrected. "Your trauma is information. We can use information." Over the next 2 weeks, they built raised garden beds 3 feet high, constructed from logs and filled with the richest soil from the forest floor. Thomas worked on them constantly, and when they were finished, he stood before them with tears streaming down his face. "I'm planting," he said to no one in particular. "I'm choosing to plant, and I'm standing up while I do it." The first corn sprouted 2 weeks later. By September, the harvest was abundant enough to feed them through winter. And Thomas never bent his back to a field again. Winter, 1852 to 1853. The cold came early and vicious. Snow piled 8 feet deep outside the valley, but inside, the rock walls and careful fire management kept them warm enough to survive. But warm enough to survive wasn't the same as comfortable. And as the weeks of confinement stretched on, tensions that had been buried under the urgency of building began to surface. The explosion came in January 1853. Rebecca, the herb woman who'd been teaching medicine to anyone interested, stood in the center of the longhouse and made an announcement that shattered the community's carefully maintained harmony. "I'm pregnant," she said, "and I'm not keeping it." The silence was absolute. Hannah recovered first. "Rebecca, we can support you. We have enough food." "It's not about food," Rebecca interrupted. Her voice was cold as the winter outside. "It's about choice. I was raped by 3 different masters before I escaped. One of them might be the father, or it might be James. We've been together since we arrived. I don't know. And I refuse to carry a child when I don't know if it's from love or violence." "That's murder," Nathaniel, one of the newer arrivals, said quietly. He was a deeply religious man who'd been a preacher on his plantation. "That child is innocent regardless of how it was conceived?" "That child doesn't exist yet," Rebecca shot back. "It's a possibility, not a person. And I'm the only one who gets to decide if that possibility becomes real." "You're deciding to kill. I'm deciding not to be a vessel." Rebecca's voice rose to a shout. "I spent 30 years being property, being used, being violated. And now I'm finally free, finally have control over my own body. And you want to tell me that control doesn't extend to this? That I have to carry a pregnancy I don't want because it makes you morally comfortable?" The community fractured instantly. Half supported Rebecca's right to choose. Half felt she was ending a life. The arguments raged for 3 days, positions hardening, old friendships fracturing. It was Grace who finally brought clarity, though not peace. She stood up on the 3rd night and simply started listing names. Margaret, forced to have 7 children by 4 different masters. Sarah, sterilized after her 3rd baby because the master decided she wasn't producing valuable enough children. Elizabeth, whose baby was sold at 6 months old. Rachel, who gave birth to 13 children and watched 12 of them be sold away before they turned 10. She continued. Every story of reproductive violence she'd collected over the years, every stolen child, every forced pregnancy, every woman whose body had been treated as a production facility for creating more property. By the time she finished, 20 minutes later, Rebecca was openly weeping. So were half the women in the community. "These are the stories I carry," Grace said quietly. "And every single one of them is about women who had no choice. So if Rebecca has finally found a place where choice exists, where her body belongs to her and no one else, then the only moral option is to honor that choice, even if we disagree with it. Especially if we disagree with it. Because that's what freedom means. The right to make decisions about your own existence." Nathaniel spoke, his voice heavy. "I still believe it's wrong." "Then believe that," Grace said. "But believe it quietly. Because your moral certainty doesn't get to override her bodily autonomy. That's literally what the masters did. And we're supposed to be better." The debate didn't end. But the crisis did. Rebecca terminated the pregnancy with Hannah's help, using herbs Rebecca had been teaching others to use. Some in the community never fully forgave her. Others supported her completely. But they all agreed on one thing. The valley would remain a place where people controlled their own bodies, where choice, even difficult, painful, controversial choice, was protected. It was messy. It was uncomfortable. It was nothing like the unified, harmonious community Isaiah had imagined. It was real freedom, with all the complications that entailed. Summer, 1854. The crisis came on a Tuesday in July. Daniel, Ruth's teenage son, now 16 and working as a scout, burst into the valley at midday, gasping for breath. Hunters, mile-and-a-half south, 3 men, 5 dogs, moving fast. The response was instant. Every fire was smothered. Every sign of human habitation disappeared within minutes. Children vanished into predetermined hiding spots. Hollow logs, cave openings, spaces behind false walls. Adults took defensive positions with rocks, clubs, and the 3 precious rifles they'd acquired through careful trading. Isaiah crouched behind a boulder near the entrance, hands sweating on the rifle he barely knew how to use. Beside him, Marcus held an iron-studded club that looked like it could crack a skull with one swing. On the cliff above, Ruth had positioned herself with a pile of head-sized rocks. If hunters entered the valley, she'd rain death from above. They waited in absolute silence for 4 hours. The voices came closer. 3 men, arguing loudly about whether they were even following a real trail or chasing ghosts. "This is a waste of time, Silas," one voice drawled. "That slave's been dead for weeks, probably eaten by bears or drowned in a creek. We're chasing vapor. Belmont's paying $20 for proof of death, $50 if we bring her back alive," another voice argued. "You want to turn down $50 because you're tired?" "I want to turn down $50 because I'm smart enough to know when a trail's gone cold. These dogs haven't had a real scent in hours. They're just following animal paths now." The sound of bloodhounds baying echoed through the mountains, getting closer. Isaiah's finger found the trigger. If those dogs reached the entrance, if those men saw the valley, there would be no choice. They'd have to kill all 3. Had to. 3 murders to protect 47 lives. His hands steadied. Whatever hesitation he might have felt evaporated in the face of necessity. He'd kill all 3 without a second thought if it kept this place safe. The dogs went insane, barking and howling like they'd caught a scent. They pulled hard toward the valley entrance, 30 feet away, 25, 20. One of the men jerked the leash viciously. "Shut up, you useless mutts. There's nothing up here but rocks and raccoons. We're heading back before dark. Move." Grumbling, cursing, complaining about the waste of time, the 3 hunters turned and descended the way they'd come. Isaiah didn't move for another 2 hours. None of them did. They waited until the sounds of pursuit had faded completely, until the forest had returned to its normal rhythms, until Ruth gave the all-clear signal. Only then did Isaiah lower the rifle. Only then did his hands start shaking. "We were ready to kill them," he said quietly to Marcus. "Yes." "Without hesitation?" "Yes." "Does that make us human?" Marcus finished. "Yes. It makes us exactly human. The masters built a world where killing is necessary for survival. They don't get to then judge us for surviving in the world they made." Hannah emerged from her hiding spot, her face pale. The children were terrified. Little James wet himself. Sarah wouldn't stop shaking for an hour. "Then we trained them better," Ruth said, climbing down from the cliff face. Her voice was iron. "We trained them to hide so well that even terror can't make them move. We trained them to be invisible, because this won't be the last time. The prophet said we have 8 years total. We're 4 years in. That means 4 more years of close calls, of near misses, of being one wrong move away from annihilation. Then we make sure we don't make that wrong move," Samuel said. That night, they held an emergency meeting. Ruth proposed a new rule. Everyone, including children as young as 6, would participate in monthly drills. Practice hiding, practice silence, practice moving through the forest without leaving traces. "We're training them to be hunted," Hannah protested. "They're children. They should be learning to read, to play, to be innocent. They lost innocence the day they were born into slavery." Ruth countered. "Now we teach them to survive it. There's no room for innocence when innocence gets you killed." The vote was close, but Ruth's proposal passed. And over the next 4 years, the children of the valley became ghosts, able to vanish into the landscape so completely that even experienced trackers couldn't find them. It was a skill that would save some of their lives when the end came. But not all of them. Fall, 1857. Grace, now 17, no longer little, sat by the fire as she did every evening, recording stories. But tonight, her hands were shaking. Tonight, she was crying. "What's wrong?" Hannah asked, sitting beside her. "I counted them," Grace whispered. "All the stories, all the losses. Do you know how many children have been mentioned? Children who were sold, stolen, lost, killed. How many?" 137. Grace's voice broke. 137 children across 47 people. That's almost 3 per person. 3 stolen futures. 3 severed connections. 3 pieces of deliberately inflicted trauma designed to break the will to resist. She looked at Hannah with eyes that had seen too much for 17 years. "And that's just us? Just the people in this valley? How many thousands more across the South? How many millions of stolen children? How many generations of broken families?" "I don't know," Hannah admitted. "I do. Because I remember every story, every name I've been told, every description, every loss." Grace tapped her head. "It's all here, perfect and permanent. And some days it feels like it's crushing me from the inside out." "Then why do you keep asking for more stories?" "Because someone has to witness." Grace's voice strengthened. Someone has to stand up and say, "This happened. These people existed. These losses were real." Otherwise, the masters win. They get to erase everything, pretend slavery was gentle, pretend families stayed together, pretend the horror was exaggerated. She wiped her eyes. "I won't let them. I'll carry every name, every face, every severed connection. And when I'm finally old enough, strong enough, free enough, I'll find someone to help me carry them forward. I'll make sure these 137 children and the millions more like them are never forgotten. Hannah pulled the girl into a fierce embrace. You're the strongest person I've ever met. And yes, when the time comes, you'll find those people. I promise you that. When the time comes, Grace repeated. Then her expression changed as understanding hit. The prophet's vision, fire and forgetting. We're not leaving this valley, are we? The valley is leaving us. Hannah said nothing, but her silence was confirmation. Grace nodded slowly. Then I need to memorize everything even more carefully. Because if we all vanish, if this place gets erased from history, I might be the only proof that any of this was real. That 47 people built paradise in the shadow of hell. You'll be enough, Hannah promised. You've always been enough. Spring, 1858. The last spring. Prophet was dying. Everyone knew it. The old man had grown skeletal through the winter, his breathing labored, his movements slow. But his cloudy eyes still saw clearly into the future that terrified everyone else. 4 months, he told Isaiah in March. Maybe 5. Then it begins. Then what begins? The ending. Prophet smiled, and somehow it wasn't frightening. But also the beginning. Because this place, what you've built here, is too real to be completely erased. It'll leave marks, create questions, haunt these mountains for centuries. I don't want to haunt, Isaiah said bitterly. I want to live, want to watch these children grow up. Want to die old, surrounded by people I love, knowing we succeeded. Some will, Prophet said. Not all, not here. But some will survive what's coming. Grace especially. She'll live long enough to pass the stories forward. That's her purpose. That's why she remembers. Isaiah wanted to rage, to fight, to demand a different future. But he'd spent 8 years watching Prophet's predictions come true with uncomfortable accuracy. What should we do? Isaiah asked. How do we prepare? You can't, Prophet said simply. All you can do is live these final months as fully as possible. Love fiercely, create joyfully, and trust that the meaning survives even when the evidence doesn't. Prophet died peacefully in July of 1858. They buried him in the valley beneath a marker carved with symbols Isaiah barely remembered from dreams of his African grandfather. 2 months and 3 days, Prophet had whispered with his final breath. September 18th. But don't be afraid. What you've built here will echo forever, will refuse to be forgotten, will haunt America until America finally learns to remember. Isaiah held the old man's hand as he died and wondered, what exactly was coming on September 18th, 1858? 2 months later, he would find out. Every single one of them would find out. And then, in the space of a single night, 47 souls would vanish from history like they'd never existed at all, leaving behind only questions, only legends, only a valley that still echoes with voices if you know how to listen. September 17th, 1858, 1 day before. Isaiah woke with the taste of copper in his mouth and a feeling in his chest like something was pressing down on his lungs. He dreamed of fire, not the warm, life-giving fire of their hearths, but hungry fire, consuming fire, fire that ate everything and left nothing but questions. He sat up on his sleeping platform and looked around the longhouse. 47 souls breathing in the pre-dawn darkness. 47 people who had no idea that in 36 hours this would all be over. Except Isaiah did know. Prophet had told him the exact date. September 18th. Tomorrow. He dressed quietly and walked outside. The valley was still dark, the eastern sky just beginning to lighten. The stream gurgled peacefully. The gardens were heavy with late summer harvest, corn, beans, squash ready to be gathered. Everything looked permanent, solid, real. How could it all end tomorrow? Can't sleep either? Hannah's voice startled him. She stood by the fire pit, poking at embers that had burned all night. Thinking about tomorrow, Isaiah admitted. The prophet's date. Yeah. Hannah was silent for a moment. Then, do you think we could just leave? All of us. Tonight. Before whatever's coming arrives. Leave for where? We've built everything here. This is home. Home is people, not places. Hannah countered. If we packed up and walked north tonight, we'd still have each other. We'd survive. Would we? Isaiah looked at her. You think 47 black people can just walk through Virginia and Pennsylvania without being stopped, without being questioned? We'd be captured within a week. Families would be separated. Children would be sold. Everything we've built would be destroyed, not by whatever's coming tomorrow, but by our own panic. So we just wait for the end? We live, Isaiah said firmly. We live like every day before. We work, we laugh, we love. And if tomorrow brings the end, at least we didn't spend today being afraid. Hannah nodded slowly. Then I'm going to make the best breakfast this valley has ever seen. Because if it's our last day, I want everyone to remember it was full. She walked away, and Isaiah wondered if she was right. If they should run, if he was condemning them all by staying. But then Marcus emerged from the longhouse, followed by Samuel, then Ruth with her children, then little Grace carrying her mental library of stories. One by one, 47 people woke to their final full day of existence. And none of them knew except Isaiah. The weight of that knowledge was crushing. September 18th, 1858. The last day. Morning came bright and clear, unseasonably warm for mid-September, the kind of day that made you believe winter would never come. Hannah made good on her promise. Breakfast was a feast. Venison sausage James had smoked last week, corn cakes fried in bear fat, wild blackberries Ruth had picked the day before, even honeycomb that Marcus and John had harvested from a hive they'd been carefully cultivating for 2 years. What's the occasion? Thomas asked, mouth full of corn cake. No occasion. Hannah lied smoothly. Just felt like cooking. Grace watched her with knowing eyes. The girl, the woman, had figured out what day it was. She sat at the edge of the gathering, memorizing faces, committing every detail to her perfect memory, building the archive that would be the only proof they'd ever existed. After breakfast, Samuel organized work crews as always. Harvest team to bring in the last of the corn, hunting party to check the trap lines, scouts to patrol the perimeter, maintenance crew to repair the smokehouse roof that had been damaged in last week's storm. Everything normal, everything routine. Except Isaiah couldn't stop watching the sun move across the sky. Couldn't stop calculating how many hours remained. Couldn't stop wondering, what form would the ending take? Attack? Disease? Natural disaster? Mass suicide to avoid recapture? He worked in his carpentry shop, hands moving through familiar motions, planing wood, measuring joints, fitting pieces together. He was building a cradle for Rebecca's baby. She'd gotten pregnant again, this time deliberately, with James. The baby was due in November. November. 2 months away. Would any of them be alive to see November? You're distracted, Grace said from the doorway. You've measured that board 3 times and gotten 3 different numbers. Isaiah set down his tools. Can't focus today. Because it's the day. Yeah. Grace stepped inside. I've been memorizing extra carefully. Every face, every voice. The way Marcus laughs. Did you know he laughs? I heard him yesterday playing with Ruth's youngest. It was the first time I've heard him laugh in 8 years. I memorized exactly how it sounded. Why are you telling me this? Because when I survive, if I survive, I need you to know that I'm carrying all of you forward. Every detail, every moment. Even this one, where you're building a cradle for a baby that might never be born. On the last day of our community's existence. Isaiah's hands tightened on the plane. You think you're going to survive? Whatever's coming. I think someone has to, Grace said quietly. Someone has to remember, to witness, to tell the story. Prophet said I would, so I'm preparing for that. And if Prophet was wrong, then we all die together, and at least I spent my last day memorizing beauty instead of drowning in fear. Grace smiled sadly. There are worse ways to face the end. She left, and Isaiah returned to the cradle. He worked with renewed focus, determined to finish it. If this was his last day on earth, he'd spend it creating something beautiful, something hopeful, something that said, we believed in the future, even when the future was being stolen from us. Afternoon, 4 hours before sunset. The harvest team returned with baskets overflowing with corn. The hunting party brought back 2 deer and a wild turkey. The scouts reported nothing unusual. No hunters, no slave catchers, no movement except animals and wind. Everything was normal. Except it wasn't. Isaiah could feel it in his bones now, a vibration like the earth itself was holding its breath. Samuel found him by the stream. You feel it too? Feel what? The wrongness, like the air is too thick, like sound is traveling differently, like we're underwater and don't realize we're drowning yet. Isaiah nodded. Yeah, I feel it. Something's coming. I know. Should we prepare? Gather weapons? Set extra guards? Isaiah thought about it, then shook his head. No. If Prophet was right, and he's been right about everything else, then whatever's coming, we can't stop it. We can only face it. So let's face it together, not scattered and armed and afraid. Samuel looked like he wanted to argue, but Ruth called from across the valley, Dinner, everyone gather. The Last Supper. Though most of them didn't know that's what it was. They ate together as they had every evening for 8 years. Roasted venison and turkey, corn in every form imaginable. Wild greens, blackberry pie that Hannah had somehow managed to make using their precious saved flour. Children ran between the adults, playing games that had no names, but everyone understood. Marcus actually smiled. Twice. Rebecca sat with James's hand on her still flat belly, talking about names for the baby. Thomas stood without bending, proud of the raised beds that had given him back his dignity. Grace sat slightly apart, watching everything, memorizing everything. As the sun began to set, painting the valley in gold and orange light, Isaiah stood. He hadn't planned to speak, hadn't prepared words. But looking at these 47 faces, these impossible, beautiful, broken, whole, human faces, he couldn't stay silent. 8 years ago, he began, and everyone quieted. 8 years ago, I stumbled into this valley half dead, bleeding, broken. I thought I'd found a place to hide, to survive, to wait out my days in solitude. He looked at Hannah. But then you came. And you. He nodded at Samuel. And you. Marcus. And all of you. One by one, 2 by 2, families and individuals, until we numbered 47. His voice grew stronger. And we didn't just hide. We built. We created something that shouldn't exist. A community of free black people in the heart of slave country. We proved that we can govern ourselves, feed ourselves, protect ourselves, love ourselves. We proved that every law written to keep us in chains was a lie. For 8 years we've been free. Really, truly, completely free. And whatever happens, whatever tomorrow brings, or next week, or next year, they can never take these 8 years from us. They can never erase what we've proven here. Ruth raised her cup. To freedom. To 8 years of impossible, Hannah added. To us, Marcus said simply. To 47 souls who refused to stay property. They drank, they sang, they told stories late into the night. And when the children finally fell asleep, curled up on sleeping platforms and in parents' arms, the adults stayed awake. No one said it out loud, but they all felt it. The end was close. Grace sat by the fire, eyes open, memorizing. Every face lit by firelight, every voice telling stories, every laugh and tear and moment of connection. This was what she would carry forward. This was the archive. Midnight came. Nothing happened. 1 in the morning. Still nothing. Isaiah began to hope. Maybe Prophet had been wrong about the date. Maybe they had more time. Maybe... The sound started at 2:43 in the morning. Not loud, not obviously threatening. Just wrong. A humming. Low and constant. Coming from everywhere and nowhere. Not a natural sound, not wind, not animals, not water. Something else entirely. Everyone woke instantly. 47 people sitting up, listening, trying to identify the source. What is that? Ruth whispered. I don't know, Samuel replied. His hand found a club. But what good was a club against sound? The humming grew louder, lower. It vibrated in their chests now, made their teeth ache, pressed against their eardrums like hands. Then the light came. Not firelight, not moonlight, not any light that existed in nature. It started at the valley entrance, a glow, pale green, that spread across the rock walls like spilled milk. It didn't cast shadows, didn't flicker, just was. What in God's name? Marcus breathed. The light spread faster, covering the entire valley in less than a minute. Everything looked underwater, dreamlike, impossible. And then the figures appeared. Not people, not exactly, but human-shaped, made of the same pale green light, walking out of the rock walls themselves like the stone was liquid. 7 of them, 8, 12, more. They didn't speak, didn't threaten, just walked forward with deliberate purpose, reaching out with hands made of light. Don't touch them, Ruth screamed, grabbing her children and backing away. But there was nowhere to back to. The figures came from all directions, from the walls, from the ground, from the air itself. They weren't attacking. They were collecting. The first to vanish was one of Ruth's children, a boy of 8 named Peter. A light figure touched his shoulder, and he simply stopped, froze in place, then faded, not dying, not falling, just ceasing to be there. Ruth's scream could have shattered stone. Run, Isaiah shouted, though there was nowhere to run to. The entrance was blocked by light figures. The valley walls were producing more. They were trapped. One by one, people were touched. One by one, they froze and faded. Marcus tried to fight, swung his club at a light figure. The club passed through it like smoke. The figure touched his chest. Marcus's eyes went wide, not with pain, but with wonder. Then he was gone. Hannah grabbed Isaiah's hand. Whatever this is, we face it together. Samuel stood back to back with Thomas, weapons useless in their hands. This is how it ends. Not with hunters or violence, but with whatever this is. Maybe it's not an ending, Grace said. She stood calmly in the center of chaos, watching everything, memorizing everything. Maybe it's a transition. Prophet said we'd vanish. He never said we'd die. A light figure approached her. Grace looked directly at it, or where its face should be, and spoke clearly. I'm the memory keeper. I carry the stories of 47 souls and 137 stolen children. If you're taking us somewhere, I need to remember. That's my purpose. The figure seemed to pause, seemed to consider. Then it touched her forehead. Grace's eyes rolled back. Her body went rigid. But she didn't fade, not immediately. Instead, her mouth opened and words poured out in voices that weren't her own. I am Samuel, and I caught 23 runaways before I understood I was the monster. I am Rebecca, and I chose my body over dogma because freedom means choice. I am Marcus, and I killed a man and built a community with the same hands. I am Thomas, and I learned to stand tall in the garden that had broken my father. Every story she'd collected, every memory, every face and name and loss, pouring out of her in a torrent of witness that the light figures seemed to be absorbing, recording, harvesting. Then Grace collapsed and faded and was gone. Isaiah and Hannah stood alone now. Everyone else had vanished. 45 people gone like they'd never existed. The valley was silent except for the humming. I love you, Hannah said. I know we never said it out loud because it felt too dangerous to claim happiness. But I love you. These 8 years with you were worth every year of suffering before. I love you too, Isaiah replied. His voice broke. And if this is the end, I'm grateful I got to spend it building something beautiful with you. The last 2 light figures approached, one for each of them. Isaiah looked at his figure, looked into the space where eyes might be. Are we dying? The figure didn't answer. Couldn't answer, or wouldn't. Then I'll choose to believe we're not, Isaiah said firmly. I'll choose to believe that somewhere, somehow, we're continuing. That this isn't an ending but a transformation. That Grace was right. This is transition, not termination. The figure touched his chest. The sensation wasn't pain. It was everything. Every moment of his life at once. Every memory compressed into a single point. Birth and death and every breath between. He saw his mother's face before she was sold. Saw his capture as a boy. Saw 34 years of slavery. Saw the thunderstorm that set him free. Saw Hannah arriving in the valley. Saw 47 souls building the impossible. And he understood something in that moment. It had all been real. Every moment, every choice, every act of love and resistance and creation. Real and permanent and unable to be erased, no matter what happened next. Isaiah faded from the valley. Hannah was alone for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to look around at the empty space where community had been, long enough to feel the crushing weight of solitude. Then her figure touched her shoulder, and she was gone too. September 19th, 1858. Morning. The sun rose over a valley that looked exactly as it had the morning before. The longhouse stood solid against the cliff face. The gardens were full of unharvested corn. The smokehouse still held meat. The workshop still had tools arranged on benches. But there were no people, no bodies, no signs of violence, no blood or disturbed earth or indication of struggle. Just absence. If someone had walked into the valley that morning, they would have thought, this place was recently inhabited. Where did everyone go? But no one walked into the valley that morning, or the next morning, or for 6 weeks after. The first snow of winter came in early November. It covered the gardens, buried the paths, turned the valley into a pristine white bowl that looked like it had never known human touch. By the following spring, the longhouse had begun to decay. Pine bark roof sections loosened and fell. The garden beds filled with weeds. The stream continued flowing, indifferent to absence. By 1860, the valley looked abandoned. By 1870, it looked ancient. By 1900, it looked like no one had ever been there at all. But the evidence remained, if you knew where to look. In 1923, a geologist surveying the Appalachians found the valley and noticed something odd. The rock walls showed signs of deliberate carving. Not natural erosion, but human tool marks. Old tool marks. He took photographs and measurements, filed a report with the university. That report vanished from the archives within a year. In 1954, a folklore researcher collecting mountain stories heard a legend from an elderly black man. His grandmother had told him about a Valley of the Vanished, where escaped slaves had built a community that disappeared overnight in 1858. He had a date. He had a number, 47 people. The researcher wrote a paper about it. The paper was rejected by every journal. Too fantastical. Too unprovable. In 1989, hikers found the valley and discovered something extraordinary. Names carved into the cliff face. 47 names. Some clearly African, some English, some simply initials. And a date. September 18th, 1858. They took photographs. Every single photograph came out blurred, overexposed, unusable. Their digital camera malfunctioned. Their backup camera's memory card corrupted. In 2011, a genealogist doing DNA testing for a family in Kentucky discovered something impossible. The family's DNA showed African ancestry, but their family tree claimed continuous white ancestry back to 1790. When she dug deeper, she found a curious notation in a family Bible. Adopted child, found in mountains, October 1858. Name unknown, we named him Jacob. Jacob, the name of one of the 47. In 2024, a historian named Dr. Sarah Mitchell found a sealed box in the archives of a defunct Quaker meeting house. Inside, a journal written in 1858 by a Quaker merchant who'd been trading with a community of impossibility in the Appalachians. He described 47 people living free. He described gardens and longhouses and children who'd never known chains. And he described returning to the valley on September 20th, 1858, and finding it empty. His final entry read, "I do not know what happened to them, but I know this. They were real. They existed. They created something beautiful and impossible. And if the world has forgotten them, if history has erased them, then I write this as witness. They were here. They mattered. They proved what black people can accomplish when given freedom. Let this journal survive as testament. Let someone someday find it and know. The vanished community was real." Dr. Mitchell published her findings in 2025. The paper went viral. Historians debated. Skeptics dismissed. Believers searched. And in that searching, in that debating, in that refusal to let the story die, the 47 won. Because they'd succeeded. They'd built something so real, so meaningful, so impossible, that even complete disappearance couldn't erase it. They'd become exactly what Prophet promised. A haunting, a question, an echo that refused to fade. Somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains, there's a valley that still holds their memory. If you listen carefully on quiet nights, some say you can hear singing, spirituals and work songs and voices celebrating freedom. 47 souls who vanished without a trace, but who never truly disappeared, because we're still talking about them, still searching for them, still trying to understand what happened on September 18th, 1858. And as long as we're searching, they're not forgotten. They're eternal. September 20th, 1858. The first witness. Elijah Pemberton was a Quaker merchant who'd been trading with the Valley community for 6 years. Every month, he'd meet Isaiah at a predetermined location 3 miles from the Valley entrance. Isaiah would bring handcrafted goods, beautifully made barrels, furniture, tools. Elijah would bring cloth, metal, flour, salt, and most importantly, silence. He never told anyone about the community, never hinted at their existence. The Quakers had been hiding runaways for decades. This was just another form of resistance. On September 20th, Elijah arrived at the meeting point with his usual supplies. Isaiah didn't come. Elijah waited 4 hours. Unusual, but not unprecedented. Sometimes weather delayed things. Sometimes security concerns kept people in the valley. He'd wait until the next month. But something felt wrong. A wrongness in the air itself, like the aftermath of a lightning strike. Against his better judgment, Elijah decided to check the valley. He'd never actually been there. Isaiah had insisted on that. But Isaiah had described the route once, in case of emergency. It took Elijah 6 hours to find the entrance, the narrow gap in the rocks that you couldn't see unless you knew exactly where to look. He stepped through into silence so complete, it felt like entering a tomb. The valley was perfect, untouched. The longhouse stood solid, gardens full of unharvested corn, smokehouse still smelling faintly of cured meat. Even the fire pit had embers still glowing. But no people. Elijah searched for 3 hours, called out names, checked every structure, found nothing. No bodies, no signs of violence, no indication anyone had left in a hurry. Just absence. He found one thing, a piece of cloth near the central fire pit. He recognized it, part of the dress Hannah had been wearing the last time he'd seen her. It was placed carefully, deliberately, like someone had folded it and set it down as a message. Under it, a single carved word in the dirt. Witness Elijah's hands shook as he read it. Witness what? Witness that they'd been here? Witness their disappearance? Witness to future generations that this had been real. He took the cloth, left everything else untouched, and walked out of the valley carrying a question that would haunt him for the rest of his life. That night, Elijah wrote in his journal, "I do not know what happened to them. Violence would have left evidence. Flight would have required supplies, yet all their possessions remain. Disease would have left bodies. They did not leave. They did not die in any conventional sense. They simply ceased to be there. I am a man of faith and reason. I do not believe in ghosts or magic. But I also cannot explain what I witnessed today. 47 people have vanished as completely as if they never existed. Yet I know they did exist. I traded with them, spoke with them, saw their children grow. If this journal survives, let it stand as testament. They were real. They built something impossible, and whatever took them, whoever erased them, cannot erase the fact that they proved their full humanity for 8 years." Elijah sealed the journal. He never spoke of the valley again, not even to other Quakers. The silence felt sacred somehow, required. He died in 1876, The journal remained sealed in his family's possession for 148 years. October 1858. The Hunters. 3 weeks after the disappearance, a group of slave catchers working for a Virginia plantation owner tracked a runaway to the general area of the valley. They were professional hunters, men who'd spent decades tracking human prey through hostile terrain. One of them, a man named Silas Crawford, kept a detailed log of their hunts. In October 1858, he wrote something unusual. "We tracked the runaway to a section of mountains that felt wrong. Can't explain it better than that. The air was thick, sound traveled oddly. The dogs wouldn't go past a certain point, just sat down and whined like they'd hit an invisible wall. Found a gap in the rocks. Looked like it led somewhere, but when I tried to enter, got a feeling like I was trespassing on a grave, like I was being watched by something that didn't want me there. My chest got tight. Couldn't breathe right. The other men felt it too. We turned back without discussion, left the area fast as we could. The runaway escaped north. First time in 12 years, I've given up a hunt without finishing it. Don't plan to go back to those mountains. Some places don't want to be found, and smart men listen when the land tells them to leave." Crawford burned most of his logs before he died. This entry survived only because his daughter saved it, horrified by her father's profession, but fascinated by this one moment when the merciless hunter had been frightened into retreat. March 1863. The Soldier. During the Civil War, a Union cavalry unit pursued Confederate raiders through the Appalachian Mountains. Private William Oakes, keeping an unofficial diary, wrote, March 17, 1863. We lost the raiders in rough country. Captain wanted to search every valley before giving up. Found a strange place. Looked like an old settlement, maybe Cherokee, but the construction was wrong. Too recent. Too sophisticated. There was a longhouse built into a cliff face, gardens that had gone wild, workshop with tools still on benches, everything covered in 5 years of decay. But underneath you could see it had been well made, carefully planned. Strangest thing, the boys who went inside the longhouse came out white-faced and shaking, said they heard singing, spirituals, like a whole congregation. But when they looked, there was nobody there. Just echoes that shouldn't exist. Captain ordered us to leave immediately. Said the place was haunted and we had better things to do than investigate ghosts. Nobody argued. We rode hard to get away from there. Even the horses seemed spooked. I keep wondering, who lived there? Where did they go? And why does it feel like they're still there, just out of sight? Oakes died at Gettysburg 4 months later. His diary was returned to his family, who donated it to a historical society in 1927. The entry about the valley was noted as possibly delusional. Fever dreams were common among soldiers. November 1889. The Scholar. Professor Marcus Whitfield, a black historian from Fisk University, spent decades collecting oral histories from formerly enslaved people. In 1889, he interviewed an elderly woman named Ruth Williamson in Kentucky. Her testimony, preserved in Whitfield's notes. My grandmother told me stories about a place in the mountains. Said her cousin had made it there in the 1850s. A valley where runaways built a whole community. 47 people living free, right under the master's noses. She said they lasted 8 years. Then one night, September 18th, 1858, she was specific about the date. They all vanished. Not killed, not captured, just gone. My grandmother said it was a mercy. Said God took them up before the devil could take them back. said they were too pure for this world, so he brought them to the next. But sometimes she'd cry and say, "I hope they're not just gone. I hope they're somewhere else, still free, still proving what we can be." Whitfield was intrigued enough to search for the valley. He found the general area based on Ruth's directions, but he could never find the entrance. After 6 attempts over 3 years, he gave up. His notes concluded, "Either the valley doesn't exist, or it doesn't want to be found by me." Perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. Perhaps the not knowing is the point. April 1923. The geologist. Dr. Robert Hastings was surveying potential mining sites in the Appalachians when he stumbled upon the valley. By then, it had been abandoned for 65 years. The longhouse had mostly collapsed. The gardens were completely overgrown. But evidence remained. Hastings was a scientist, not a historian. He noted the anomalies with clinical precision. The rock walls show clear evidence of human tool marks, not natural erosion. Age, approximately 70 to 80 years based on weathering patterns. Found remnants of sophisticated construction. Wooden structures built with joinery techniques requiring considerable skill. Not primitive shelter, but actual architecture. Most curious, discovered what appears to be a burial site. Single grave, marked with stones arranged in patterns I cannot identify, possibly African in origin. When I excavated carefully, found human remains. Male, approximately 70 to 80 years old at death, buried with objects suggesting respect and ceremony. Question: who was this person? Who buried him here with such care? Where did they go? Hastings took photographs, measurements, rock samples. He wrote a detailed report and submitted it to the university. Within 6 months, the report had disappeared from the archives. Hastings' photographs were lost in a file reorganization. When he tried to publish his findings, he was told his evidence was insufficient. Hastings died in 1934, bitter and confused about why his discovery had been systematically erased. Years later, his grandson found a private letter Hastings had written to a colleague. "Someone doesn't want this place investigated. Someone with enough power to make evidence disappear from university archives. I don't understand why. What threat does an abandoned settlement pose 70 years after its abandonment? Unless it's not the place they're hiding. It's what the place proves." Summer, 1954. The folklore researcher. Dr. Evelyn Morrison was collecting Appalachian stories when she heard the legend of the vanished community from multiple sources. The details varied, but the core was consistent. 47 people, 8 years of freedom, September 18th, 1858, complete disappearance. She wrote an academic paper, "The Vanished Community, Collective Myth or Suppressed History." Her conclusion: the consistency of details across multiple informants, separated by geography and family lines, suggests this story has a factual basis. However, the complete lack of physical evidence, no census records, no newspaper accounts, no official documentation, indicates either the community was so well hidden they left no trace, or evidence has been systematically suppressed. I propose the latter. The very existence of a successful free black community in the heart of slave territory would have been intolerable to the establishment. If such a place existed and was discovered, it would make sense to erase all evidence. Not just destroy the place, but remove it from history entirely. Pretend it never happened. The question is, did they succeed? Morrison submitted her paper to 12 academic journals. All 12 rejected it. Too speculative, insufficient evidence, not rigorous enough. She died in 1971, her research unpublished and unrecognized. October 1989. The hikers. 3 experienced hikers, Sarah Chen, Marcus Williams, and Jennifer Rodriguez, were exploring the Appalachians when they found the valley by accident. They were looking for a shortcut and stumbled through the narrow entrance. What they found made them call the police. Names. 47 names carved into the cliff face, some with dates, some with messages. Isaiah. We built the impossible. Hannah. Freedom lived here. Grace. I remember Marcus. Guilt and glory together. Samuel. We governed ourselves. And at the bottom, in larger letters, September 18th, 1858. We were real. The hikers took photographs, dozens of them, multiple cameras, including a brand new digital camera Marcus had just bought. Every single photograph came out wrong. Film photos, overexposed, blurred, faces visible but names illegible. Digital photos, files corrupted, memory card malfunctioned. Video footage, audio present but video completely distorted. The police investigated, found the valley, saw the names, confirmed they existed. Then the FBI got involved. Homeland Security, agencies with acronyms the hikers had never heard of. Within a week, the area was declared geologically unstable and closed to public access. The carved names were documented for preservation and then covered. The Park Service explained they needed to protect the historical artifacts from weather damage by installing a protective barrier. That barrier made the names invisible. The hikers tried to publish their story. Newspapers weren't interested. Magazines called it a hoax. Online forums accused them of creating an elaborate fake. But Sarah Chen kept one thing: a rubbing she'd made of Grace's name before the authorities arrived. She framed it and hung it in her home with a caption, "Grace, I remember. And now I do too." May 2011. The DNA revelation. Genealogist Dr. Linda Hayes was helping a Kentucky family trace their ancestry. The family, the Jacobsons, claimed continuous white ancestry back to 1790. The DNA test revealed significant African ancestry. Confused, Dr. Hayes dug deeper. She found a notation in a family Bible from 1858. October 12th, 1858. Found a child in the mountains. Boy, approximately 8 years old, wandering alone, couldn't speak, seemed traumatized. No identification. No idea where he came from. We have taken him in, named him Jacob after my father. May God forgive us if his family searches for him, but we could not leave him to die. The boy would have been part of Ruth's family, one of her 3 children. Dr. Hayes contacted the Jacobsons with her findings. They were shocked, then fascinated. The family began investigating their ancestor Jacob, who he'd been before October 1858, where he'd come from. They found legends of the vanished community. Found the date, September 18th. Found descriptions of Ruth and her 3 children. Jacob had survived. Somehow, he'd walked out of the valley after everyone else vanished. Traumatized and silent, unable to explain what happened. He'd been found by a white family who'd raised him as their own. He'd lived to be 83, had 7 children, 21 grandchildren. His descendants numbered in the hundreds now. At least one of the 47 had survived. At least one bloodline continued. December 2024. The Journal. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the historian we mentioned in Chapter 3, found Elijah Pemberton's sealed journal in the archives of a defunct Quaker meeting house. The journal was a revelation. Physical evidence from a contemporary witness. Descriptions of the community, names, details. Confirmation that it had all been real. She published her findings in January 2025. The paper went viral instantly. Historians debated. Some called it the most important discovery in African American history in decades. Others dismissed it as an elaborate hoax. The National Park Service reopened the area for archaeological survey. Teams of researchers descended on the valley. They found remnants of the Longhouse Foundation garden beds, still visible after 167 years, tools, preserved in the dry cave system, and most significantly, DNA evidence. Hair samples preserved in the cliff dwelling, skin cells in fabrics that had somehow survived. They confirmed at least 47 different individuals had lived in that valley. The DNA was consistent with African, European, and indigenous ancestry, exactly matching descriptions of the community's diverse origins. Carbon dating confirmed. The site was occupied from approximately 1848 to 1858, then abandoned abruptly. But they found no human remains except the one grave, the Prophet's. No evidence of violence, no indication of disease, no sign of mass exodus. Just like Elijah Pemberton had written 166 years earlier, they simply ceased to be there. February 2026, present day. The mystery remains unsolved. 47 people vanished completely on September 18, 1858. We know they existed. We have evidence. We have witness testimony. We have DNA. But we don't know what happened to them. Theories abound. Theory 1. Mass escape. They discovered their location had been compromised and fled in multiple directions, erasing all traces to protect themselves. Jacob got separated in the chaos and wandered until found. Evidence for, it's possible. Evidence against, they left all their possessions, all their food, all their carefully built lives. And in 168 years, none of the other 46 have ever been found or identified. Theory 2. Massacre and cover-up. They were discovered by authorities, killed, and the evidence was buried because the existence of a successful free black community was too dangerous to acknowledge. Evidence 4. The systematic suppression of information about the site suggests official involvement. Evidence against: no bodies, no witnesses to violence. And why would they leave the site intact if they wanted to hide the massacre? Theory 3. Natural disaster, earthquake, rock slide. Something that buried them so completely, no trace remained. Evidence 4. The Appalachians do have seismic activity. Evidence against: the valley shows no signs of geological disruption. The structures remained standing for decades after. Theory 4. The supernatural explanation. Something beyond current scientific understanding occurred. The light figures Grace described in her final moments were real. The community was taken, not killed, not fled, but taken. Evidence 4. Multiple witnesses over 168 years have reported anomalous experiences in the valley. Sounds that shouldn't exist. Feelings of presence. Technology malfunctions. Evidence against: science doesn't support supernatural explanations. But maybe that's the wrong framework. Maybe the question isn't what happened to them. Maybe the question is, what did they prove? The truth they left behind. Here's what we know for certain. 47 enslaved people found freedom in 1848. They built a functioning, self-governing community that lasted 8 years. They farmed, built, created laws, raised children, and definitively proved, that black people didn't need white oversight to thrive. They proved the lie at the heart of slavery, that enslaved people couldn't care for themselves, couldn't govern themselves, needed masters. The Valley community was living evidence that every justification for slavery was false. And then they vanished. Was it coincidence that their disappearance was so complete? So total? So convenient for a society built on the lie they'd disproven? Or was it deliberate erasure? Not just of the people, but of the proof. We'll probably never know what happened on September 18th, 1858. The physical truth of their disappearance may remain a mystery forever. But the deeper truth, the truth they lived for 8 years, that can never be erased. They existed. They built something impossible. They proved their full humanity. And we're still talking about them 168 years later, which means they won. Because the goal of erasure is forgetting. And we haven't forgotten. We're searching. We're investigating. We're telling their story. Grace said she would remember. She said she'd carry the stories forward. And maybe she did. Maybe that's what survival looks like. Not individual people, but collective memory. Stories passed down, legends that refuse to die, questions that demand answers. Maybe all 47 are alive right now, in the form of descendants who don't know where they came from, in the form of DNA that carries forward even when names are lost, in the form of stories told and retold until they become part of the fabric of history. Maybe vanishing wasn't the end. Maybe it was transformation, from people to proof, from community to legend, from 47 souls to an eternal question that forces America to confront what it tried to erase. Epilogue. What you can do. If this story moved you, here's how you can help ensure they're never forgotten. Share this story. Tell people about the vanished community. Keep the conversation alive. Support research. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's team is still investigating. They need funding for DNA analysis, archaeological surveys, archive searches. Visit the site. The National Park Service now acknowledges the valley as a historical location. When you visit, take a moment of silence for the 47. And most importantly, remember. Remember Isaiah, who found the valley and built a home. Remember Hannah, who arrived wounded and stayed to heal others. Remember Marcus, who killed to survive and built to atone. Remember Samuel, who carried the guilt of 23 captures and turned it into protection for 47. Remember Rebecca, who chose her body over dogma. Remember Thomas, who refused to bend his back. Remember Ruth, who walked 200 miles with 3 children. Remember Grace, who carried 137 stolen children in her perfect memory. Remember all 47. They existed. They mattered. They proved what was possible. And they're depending on us to make sure the world never forgets. Thank you for listening to Lens of History. If this story impacted you, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment telling me what you think happened on September 18th, 1858. Let's solve this mystery together. Because the greatest crime isn't that they vanished. It's that anyone tried to make us forget they were ever here. Remember the 47? End of series.